everyone, it's Jack from Cultaholic.com back again with another exciting edition of AEW Dynamite. I was worried that AEW Dynamite last night would be a bit of a filler episode because of course next week's episode is absolutely stacked on the way to Revolution. I thought this episode might be a little bit filler. Turns out it was actually very eventful, but what indeed happened on last night's Dynamite and how good was it? There's only one way to find out, and that of course is by assigning each individual segment a lovely individual grade. That's right, it's time for AEW Dynamite Graded. Now, in the past few weeks, I've become really used to Jon Moxley doing the second segment of the show. After the first match, he'll be in a random urban environment somewhere and cut a promo directly to the camera. Instead, he opens the show this week with a match against Ryan Nemeth. A match? My voice is going already. We're a minute in. And at first I was like, oh, this match is surprisingly back and forth. Ryan Nemeth is getting quite a bit of offense in here and there, but then Moxley just catches him in a guillotine, chokes the life out of him. Nemeth's almost out on his feet basically, and Moxley drops him with the paradigm shift, 1, 2, 3, and it turns out to be a very conclusive victory. Moxley then grabs a mic, gets a chair, sits on it the wrong way round, guys, because he's one of us. And he says that as soon as he lost the AEW World Championship, he knew that he would do whatever it takes to get it back. This leads to him building up the very grisly nature of his upcoming stipulation for that match against Kenny Omega, the exploding barbed wire death match. And he says that conjures images of fire, blood, torture, vintage Japanese wrestling magazines, which I thought, oh, that's pretty cool. I can imagine a young Moxley somehow getting his hands on some old Japanese wrestling magazines, looking at the pictures and going, yeah, that's for me. I fancy a bit of that. But Moxley says whereas most people would be scared of that sort of thing, he's actually addicted to the grisly thrill of it. And he thinks that Omega knows that he's addicted to it, by the way. But he knows that even though this is a trap possibly laid by Omega and his boys, he can't resist it. He has to have this match. It's in his blood. And he says that even if this match is the match that ends his career, that's a pretty good way to go out. So this segment had a match and a promo in it, but it was mainly about the promo, wasn't it? And the promo from Moxley was excellent, probably like an A grade or something. The match was decent, it just did its job, it wasn't spectacular. But because this segment was weighted so heavily towards the promo aspect of it, I'm going to give it an A- grade. Good start to AEW this week. Next up, we head backstage where Lance Archer and Rey Fenix are being interviewed by not Alex Marvez. What? For their match in the main event tonight. They hype it up, you know, they're going to kick the hell out of each other, Archer says, even though they've been quite an effective tag team recently. And then Fenix talks in some sort of Spanish to not Marvez, and I realised that Marvez isn't in this segment because the dude is bilingual and Marvez, as far as we know, isn't. So I guess it makes sense, but you can't take Marvez away from us like that. Fenix talks in Spanish anyway to the interviewer, who then relays that information to Archer, saying that Fenix says that you are the worst tag partner he's ever had. This leads to a brawl between the two. They fight off camera, and I am sufficiently hyped for the main event. Next up, the Young Bucks arrive at the venue with their parents. They walk past a production truck with their images on the back of it, and they take a nice selfie with their dad in front of the images of themselves. It's supposed to be a nice moment, but obviously the Bucks aren't like that likable. Like in this, they don't come across that likable. Is that just me? Is that just me? Please let me know what you think of the Young Bucks and their likability factor in the comments below, because I was thinking, it's a bit smarmy. Because they don't go like, oh my god, it's us on the, come on dad, get in here. They're like, oh yeah, it's us, yeah. It's pretty cool, great moment, let's do the picture, yeah. And let's go, we're the Young Bucks. And I'm like, oh, come on. Anyway, because I've consumed a form of fiction at some point in my life, in any medium, books, films, TV series, I know that this means that something bad is going to happen to the parents. Next up, it's heel versus babyface action as the team of Team Taz, represented by Brian Cage and Ricky Starks, take on the Varsity Blondes, my boys, Griff Garrison and Brian Pillman Jr. Pretty early on, Brian Cage grabs Pillman Jr., drags him out the ring and powerbombs him into the ring post, and he falls down and almost seems to like land on the bottom or like on the edge of the ring steps as well. It's brutal, and somehow the match doesn't immediately end there. Like if I was Brian Cage, I'd have chucked him in the ring and probably pinned him, because that that was brutal. But Griff Garrison gets the tag, he runs wild for a little bit, he's full of fire, he's a very fiery babyface, he does a huge dive over the top onto Cage, he hits some sort of driver on Starks in the ring for a near fall. Garrison was exciting. I'm really excited for him and Pillman Jr. and where they go in the future. They also hit a very nice double team move. It's like a powerbomb / missile dropkick combination where Garrison's got his opponent up here on his shoulders and then Pillman Jr. flies off from the top rope and drop kicks him down into the powerbomb. It's really good. It only gets 2. Starks gets the tag to Cage, and this is where the match ends. Cage takes Pillman's head off with a huge clothesline, drill claw, 1, 2, 3, and it's all over. But as the heels celebrate in the ring, and as Taz laughs it up on commentary, the lights go down, the Tron comes on, and it's time for one of Darby Allin's home movies. This one depicts Sting driving a car down a dusty desert highway. It's very emotive. And the car is dragging a body bag behind it, like what Team Taz did to Darby Allin. Sting stops the car, he unzips the body bag, and Darby gets out with his TNT title. He's not even bothered. He's smiling. It hasn't bothered him one little bit. The symbolism here is obvious. Then Sting walks out. This is back to the arena now in real life. Sting walks out dragging a body bag behind him and he unzips it. But it's not Darby inside. It's Hook, Taz's son, who's all beaten up, and Taz is on commentary going, hang on, what the hell's going on? Sting then points to the rafters on the other side of the arena, the light shines on it, and Darby Allin's up there with his skateboard, and like Shawnee Michaels at WrestleMania 12, he ziplines down all the way to the ring and starts beating up lads with his skateboard, yeah. I said zipline there like Cartman in South Park, if you've seen that episode where they're all like, say zipline kids, and Cartman's like, zipline, and he's really not excited at all. But I like to imagine Darby Allin saying zipline in the same uninterested tone, because he'd probably go like, zipline dude, and then just slowly flies down to the ring. He made it look cool. He did make it look cool. Now Sting hits the ring and hits some signature Sting offense on Brian Cage. The first time I think we've seen it in AEW. Stinger splash in the corner, Scorpion death drop. Team Taz are shook. Taz gets up from his commentary station, checks on Hook, and they're all on the stage like, whoa, this guy's crazy, man. And I think it was an effective segment, wasn't it? In fact, I'm going to give this segment an A-. The match was decent. It wasn't an A- in itself, but the little bit afterwards with Sting and Darby, it was really cheesy, but it was the good kind of cheesy, like WCW when they were at their peak. It was that good form of cheesy. And if anybody knows about that, then of course that is Sting. So this segment gets an A-. I enjoyed it for what it was. It was silly, but it was very fun. Next up, we go backstage where Tony Schiavone is having a sit-down interview earlier in the day with Miro, Kip Sabian, and Penelope Ford. Miro does most of the talking here. He is furious at Orange Cassidy for ruining Kip and Penelope's wedding. In fact, he says he's furious at Orange Cassidy and can't wait to rip his head off, but he forgives Charles because he knows that Charles is a good man and he can come back to Miro and be his butler once again if he wants to. But as he's saying all this, Tony gets handed a note by a crew member from off camera and he reads it and it says, wrestle us at Revolution, yes, no, maybe, circle 1, kisses and hugs, Orange and Chuck. And I'm like, oh, those cheeky lads, what are they like? It's like school when you pass notes to each other. Miro is of course offended by this and he snatches the note from Tony and he says, Charles, you are acting like a child hanging out with Orange Cassidy, and he crumples the note up and he puts it in his mouth and it looks like he is actually going to eat it for a second, but then he just spits it at Tony, and that's the end of the segment. I'm going to give this segment a B grade. It was totally fine. I'm glad that this feud hasn't ended with the wedding angle, which I wasn't a huge fan of, but are we going to get heel Chuck Taylor? Is he going to turn on Orange Cassidy? I don't know, I shouldn't be suggesting such heinous things. Next up, we get Jake Hager versus Brandon Cutler. I have $50 dues on Brandon Cutler to win this one. I think he can do it, guys. I think it's good. If you squint, Brandon Cutler in this match kind of looks like a young Chris Daniels. So hopefully he wrestles like him, and then I can make bank. No, of course I didn't put any money on Brandon Cutler in this match. I'm not mad. But the two have a nice sort of back and forth. Hager dominates 99% of it, but Cutler does get some offense in. He hits 2 big dives to the outside. One of them nearly goes a bit scarily, but Hager just about manages to catch him. And then when Cutler goes to springboard back into the ring, Hager just wipes him out with a huge clothesline. And that's the end of the match. It ends with a clothesline, but it was a big clothesline, so I can accept that. And then immediately after the bell goes, Santana, Ortiz and Wardlow of the Inner Circle all run down and start stomping away at Cutler. Then the Young Bucks come out and they start throwing super kicks at everybody, but Hager avoids them and rolls out of there. They seem to have saved the day, but it was all a distraction. It was all a ruse because the Tron comes on and MJF and Jericho are backstage outside the venue with Papa Buck, the Buck's dad. They're with him and they've smeared ketchup all over his face. No, it's blood. It's meant to be blood, but there was a lot of it, and it was an odd colour. Now listen, that's absolutely fine. I'm not complaining about that. I'm not saying that Papa Buck should have bladed himself open for the sake of the art of pro wrestling. That would have been very silly, and I'm glad that he didn't, just for the record. MJF and Jericho throw him, whip him into the images of his own sons on the production truck, and he goes bang, and then he comes off and slides down, and there's blood on the Young Bucks on the production truck, their own father's blood. Back to ringside, if the Young Bucks love one thing in wrestling, it's sprinting to the back to protect or avenge a loved one, and that's what they're trying to do here. But as we cut back and forth between MJF and Jericho fleeing the scene and the Bucks getting closer to the scene of the crime backstage, the Bucks, this absolutely cracked me up. The Bucks are lightly jogging through the backstage area. They're like, come on, we've got to save Dad. Whew. Don't want to gas out too early though, come on. And they're just lightly jogging through the corridors on the way to save their dad. It's genius comedy, but it's not meant to be. But I mean, I laughed a lot. They finally get there, and then Matt chases after Jericho and MJF, but they're already in a car and they're tearing out of there, and the Bucks have no way of getting revenge, and Papa Buck gets loaded into an ambulance. Nick goes with him to the hospital alongside the Good Brothers. Matt stays back to look after their mother. Oh, dramatic times on Dynamite. This gets a B grade. Look, it should have been higher. It really should have been higher, but it didn't totally work for me. And that's not because of the slight jogging, okay? It's because this came for me far too close to the Darby and Sting segment, which was in a similar way, kind of chaotic, a bit of misdirection involving the Titantron and everything. But they did it far better, and it was earlier in the show, so there was no way for this one to kind of live up to it. Next up, we get Isiah Kassidy with a huge entourage, by the way, like a Cody Rhodes style entourage. He's got Matt Hardy, he's got Helico, he's got Jack Evans as well, all accompanying him to the ring, versus Hangman Page, who's out alone because he's a cowboy. Hangman is all fired up, he charges the ring, he knocks Matt Hardy off the apron at the bell and just stomps a mud hole in Isiah Kassidy. He's fired up for this one. Hangman then goes to put Kassidy through the timekeeper's table, but Kassidy manages to slip out the back and run away, and while the ref checks on him and he distracts the ref, Matt Hardy runs Hangman into the ring post. But then, in sort of a Tito Santana kind of way, like in a very 1980s babyface behaviour sort of way, John Silver and Alex Reynolds of the Dark Order run out and they just tell the ref, look what's happened. Look what Matt Hardy did. He cheated, he did. And Aubrey's like, oh, he did? Oh, well, I believe you because you're the good guys. Get out of here, Matt. And she ejects him from the ringside area. The match continues until Isiah Kassidy goes to some kind of crazy springboard thing from the outside of the ring or from the apron into the ring, bouncing off the bottom rope in a very Isiah Kassidy way. But Hangman catches him and nails the dead eye. And we don't often see that finish matches these days, so that was good to see. And it does successfully get the pinfall for Hangman. But then Matt's voice comes over the speakers and he's like, Hangman, because you didn't join me, I'm going to get revenge on you and I'm going to hurt every single member of the Dark Order as well. And then as we hear him say that, here he comes out the entrance ramp. He's got Alan Angels with him, number 5 of the Dark Order, throws him onto the stage and then grabs him and throws him off the stage, and Alan Angels does a lovely flip in midair and lands right on the timekeeper's table and just goes through it. It looks pretty painful, but I think he was okay, and it's a cool moment. And it was a bad moment as well, because the bad guys have got one over on Hangman. Oh. So yeah, that gets a B+ from me. Good match, good segment afterwards, no complaints. I'm looking forward to their match at Revolution. Even though it's one of the kind of lower down ones on the card in terms of importance for me, I think they've still built it pretty well. Now we get to my boy, Alex Marvez, who is somewhere, I don't know where, but he finds Omega and Callis in kind of a workshop, and they're working on something, and Omega's angry that Marvez is there, of course, but he also says, no, this is our destruction chamber that we are preparing for Jon Moxley. So I assume that means he's building the ring for the, what's it called? The explosion barbed wire, the dynamite, what's the stipulation again? The exploding barbed wire death match at Revolution. He's building that, I think. I think he's building that. Next up, we get the semi-finals of the American bracket in the women's tournament. It's Dr. Britt Baker, DMD, taking on Nyla Rose. Britt Baker's outmatched in this one, and it doesn't take very long before she actually leaves the match and goes into the crowd and starts throwing trash cans everywhere. And the ref starts counting, so Britt's like, oh, it is a tournament, I've probably got to stay in this. And she eventually heads back to the ring. Nyla, in a nice callback, goes to injure Britt in the same way that she did all those months ago with a cannonball senton in the corner, but Rebel's there to pull Britt out of the way, and Britt takes control, working Nyla's arm or shoulder with sneaky heel tactics, like she pulls her into the ring post at one point, and she even exposes one of the turnbuckles in the ring. Nyla regains control of the match, and she heads to the apron to go up top, but Rebel gets on the apron and throws a right hand at her, which I don't like, because that would have got Britt DQ'd, and it's a tournament, Rebel, so don't be stupid, okay? But it doesn't really matter anyway, because Nyla ducks the right hand and just, she absolutely nails Rebel with a Uranagi on the apron. Oh, that's the hardest part of the ring. Rebel then gets hit with a cannonball senton, but then Nyla gets ran into the exposed turnbuckle by Britt, who rolls her back and locks in the lockjaw. It's a nice false finish, because you think, oh, she's dazed, she's not going to be able to get out of this. But it's Nyla Rose, so she just stands up out of it all powerful, and it's a cool moment. Britt then gets a couple more near falls with roll-ups and crucifix pinning attempts and that sort of thing. Nyla kicks out of them, and then Britt gets the lockjaw in again, and this time Nyla just elbows her way out of it. So again, that was another interesting false finish. Nyla hits a huge right hand to get back into the match. Fair enough, that's very effective and very nice to see. But then she hits the beast bomb, and Britt kicks out at 2, which I was very shocked at. They get back to their feet, Britt throws a super kick, Nyla ducks it, scoops her up, beast bomb again, and that is enough for 3. This match gets a B grade, and I wish I was giving it more. It was a very ambitious match, as most of the matches on Dynamite in this tournament have been, but it fell short in 1 or 2 areas for me. It was quite slow paced at times. It really picked up for the closing stretch, obviously, but I just feel like it didn't all quite click as they maybe had hoped it would. On the positive side, I bit on a lot of the false finishes. They were quite cleverly thought out. But on the negative side again, I don't like Rebel trying to basically just get Britt DQ'd. I hate when that happens, that sort of thing, especially in a title match or a tournament setting. But again, I suppose I was surprised by the winner, which is a good thing. I wasn't expecting the finish. I thought Britt was going to win somehow. But on the bad side again, I wanted Britt to win. I feel like she is the one at the moment in the women's division with all the momentum behind her. I think she should win this tournament probably and take the belt from Hikaru Shida, but you know, I'm sure her time will come. And finally, we get our main event, Fenix versus Archer, to get into the face of the Revolution ladder match at Revolution. And they start off showing no intimidation towards each other's styles, so Fenix is not intimidated by Archer's size at all, and he's just lighting him up with chops. But then Archer is not intimidated by Fenix's speed. Like, Fenix goes into a handspring, Archer just steps aside and slams him down to the canvas. One of the biggest moments of this match is when Fenix tries to do his rope walk thing, but Jake Roberts on the outside shoves him off, and he lands on that front of the ramp, the bit that connects to the ring. He gets up, and Roberts is checking on Archer over the other side of the steps, and Fenix launches himself clean over Jake the Snake Roberts into a big senton, and he lands on Archer. It's not quite as clean as maybe they were hoping for, but it's still really cool. As we move on through the match, Archer starts to take control with his power and his size, of course, and Fenix ends up on the apron, and they do that Snitsky Paul London spot from the Royal Rumble where he like clotheslines Fenix while Fenix is on the apron, and he does like a backflip, but instead of landing on the outside, Fenix lands on the apron. I'm like, oh wow, what a spot. But then it's Fenix's turn to get some offense in, and man, he does some very Fenixy things. He does a huge double foot stomp to the back of the head, like a springboard one from the top rope and stuff. He does his rope walk across the top rope and just ends it with a punt kick to Archer's head. That spot was awesome. And then they top it even further by both heading up top, and Fenix hits maybe the most impressive Spanish fly I've ever seen. They exchange strikes in the middle of the ring, and it's Archer who decides to go to the next gear. He nails his pounce that he likes to do. He hits a buckle bomb in the corner. Fenix comes back into a huge choke slam from Archer. Archer scrapes him off the canvas, hits the blackout, and that is enough for 3. And after the match, Fenix is just devastated on the canvas and exhausted and beaten up as well. And Archer's celebrating, but then he comes over and they share a nice fist bump. And it's a very satisfying way to end the show. This match gets an A grade from me. It was awesome. I wish it had just been a little bit tighter in parts because it was on its way to an A+ grade, but it fell just a little bit short for me. But some of the stuff they did was incredibly impressive. One thing that I maybe disagree with, although not heavily, is that I feel like Fenix should have been the one in that ladder match. Think of what he could have done. But at the same time, I'd like to think that maybe him missing out on this ladder match is more a sign that he's about to have maybe a dedicated feud with somebody, maybe even a run at the world title, which he probably deserves, but he can never beat Omega, so I don't know what's going to happen, but it was a great match nonetheless. But what about this show overall? I'm going to give it an A- grade. I thought it was a good show, could have been a little bit better in parts, but still a very, very good show. Especially, as I mentioned in the intro, in a week where I was worried this would be the filler episode of Dynamite on the way to the pay-per-view. Not at all. And it was really impressive, especially because, I mean, Moxley got his match out the way early on. Cody didn't appear at all. And Omega had one kind of interview segment elsewhere, not in the arena. Despite not having full use of all their big hitters, AEW put on a great show, and I think it really goes to show how deep the talent in their roster is. So A- for the show, and thank you very much for watching. I've been Jack from Cultaholic.com. Do leave your thoughts and opinions on AEW Dynamite this week in the comments section down below. Stay safe out there, stay positive, and I'll see you very soon.